meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Here's where we will go. Nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile. Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. There have been many songs written about cars over the last 100 years or so. One of them was Beep Beep, sung by the Playmates in 1958. In this song, the driver of a Cadillac is annoyed by a Nash Rambler behind him, as the Nash Rambler keeps beeping and tooting his horn at him, and he assumes that the pathetic little Nash wants to pass the mighty Cadillac. The song is funny, but the man behind Nash was an American automotive visionary who was a force to be reckoned with. So today, we'll take a look at the early career of Charles Nash. This is a story that would typically end in tragedy. Charles William Nash was born in Cortland, Illinois in 1864, the second child and first son of David and Annie Nash. The Nash family were itinerant farm laborers and very poor. Unfortunately, most of what little money came into the household was spent on alcohol, as both of his parents were heavy drinkers. Not much was left for things like food and clothes for their children. In 1870, when young Charles was 6 years old, his parents got into a drunken brawl between each other and, once the fists stopped flying, went separate ways, each to some other farm to find work. However, they left all of their children behind and also no way to contact the parents. The owner of the farm, once he realized that there were 3 small children abandoned in a shack on his property, contacted the authorities to see what could be done. The court stepped in, and since there was no one immediately available to adopt them, assigned Charles to the farm and the state, requiring that he receive at least a bit of schooling, but otherwise indentured him as a laborer on that farm until the age of 21, at which time he would be free to go. Young Nash was now abandoned by his own parents, and after a very violent youth and as a ward of the state, he seemed destined to be a traumatized menial laborer at best for the rest of his life. He was 12 years old when he ran away from the farm he was indentured to, as well as the memories held there, and sought a new life. All he knew was farming, so he first went to a farm in Michigan to be out of the Illinois court jurisdiction. He got a job paying $8 a month at a farm in Grand Blanc, but after a few months found a better paying farm in Mount Morris, paying $12. The owner of the farm, Alexander McFarland, encouraged young Nash to learn a trade, and so while in his employ, put him into an apprenticeship as a carpenter. The focus of the carpentry being done on McFarland's farm was in producing hay that could be pressed into products, besides the obvious need to feed the animals. Nash excelled at his work and came up with innovations through carpentry and machinery to make presses that could allow hay to be an effective stuffing for chairs. After all, hand stuffing a chair with hay will work for a while, but if the hay is not well compressed, the upholstery will deform quickly and lose its appeal and comfort. Charles saw that the techniques he developed had value and looked for opportunities to exploit it. It came in 1890 when a certain Billy Durant hired him to stuff the seats of small wagons he was building through the Flint Road Cart Company. Nash proved his worth quickly and within 6 months was head of production. In that position, he introduced a new manufacturing technique, the straight-line conveyor, to speed up the process of assembly. Not a true moving assembly line for full production, but it did make producing the components of the carts much faster and easier, which sped things up in the factory and increased profits. One of Durant's partners, Dallas Dort, was most impressed with his work and continued to promote him. By 1900, the company was called Durant Dort Carriage Company and was at the time the largest maker of carriage bodies in the world, with Charles Nash as the vice president of operations. But horse-drawn carriages were starting to be overshadowed by newfangled automobiles, and the company was soon building bodies for cars. Durant purchased the Buick Motor Company in 1904 and soon put Nash in charge of making the bodies for the cars. Nash was not an engineer, but was a whiz at managing production and people, and the company prospered. In 1910, Durant made Nash the vice president of Buick, and one of the first things Charles did in this role was to hire a young engineer from a small locomotive company to take over engineering duties at Buick, a young Walter Chrysler. 1912 was a pivotal year for Nash. Durant was the president of General Motors with his friend Sam McLaughlin at his side. Unfortunately, Durant was buying too many small automakers that were not profitable and was ousted by the board that year. So the board of directors looked around for a replacement, and though Sam McLaughlin's name was on the table, Charles Nash had proven to be a man of the people and able to turn profits, and so, in November of 1912, he was named president of General Motors. For the next 4 years, he led GM into great prosperity through his incredible ability to relate to people of all kinds and help them develop their own talents, as well as his analytical mind regarding streamlining production and solving problems on the factory floor. But he wanted a car company of his own, and so in 1916 he left General Motors to establish his own, which is a tale for another day. And I do believe that it's fair to say that you'd be hard-pressed to find a more impressive rags to riches tale in the American automotive industry than that of Charles Williams Nash. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.